Hi, it's David here again for our C-suite conversations. So during this time of coronavirus, I just thought we'd get some experts in to talk about what they do, to share some tips with you as a business owner, as a business leader, in how you can thrive during this time and how you can hopefully bring your business through this out the other side in a better place than it was before. For this conversation today, I've got a good friend of mine called Allen Moxham. Allen runs Spirit Level Communications, so he's a sort of communication guru, all things on messaging, branding, all those things that we know and love that are so important for how we kind of talk to our target market. And I've just asked Allen just for a few minutes to talk to us now about the kind of importance of communication during this time. And this is obviously quite a difficult time for many people. They're at home, they're doing things via their iPads, their phones, their laptops. Zoom shares are going through the roof. Why is it important for businesses right now to be continuing to communicate externally?
Well, let me just first of all say, David, thank you for inviting me to this conversation. So I'm really looking forward to it. It reminds me a little bit of the Best Marigold Hotel and that lovely quote which says, everything will be all right in the end, and if it's not all right, it's not the end. I was listening to the Queen's broadcast yesterday when she was basically saying, guys, we've got to. This is a big challenge, but we've almost got to roll up our sleeves and show our mettle. And the thing will pass. And I think there's a little bit of that in business here, but this is a challenge for us, but actually getting through it, good communication is absolutely key, because what it will do, it will help us maintain relationships. It will ensure our reputation remains intact. And what we want to do is hopefully come out of this in a better position than when we went into it, which is quite possible. So why is good communication important? I think first of all, I would say that it improves performance, it improves productivity, staff morale, it reduces stress, it saves time. It reminds me of the sort of anecdote really from the First World War, which the boys were in the trenches, but from sort of HQ comes down the message, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. But what's heard in the trenches is send reinforcements, we're going to a dance. And of course, what actually in that is that there's a huge disconnect between actually what is said and what gets through. And with that communication, effective communication, it improves performance, it saves time, it gives us a clear strategy, and it's very focused, so it achieves our goals. And that's I think really clear. And that probably leads me on to maybe a second thing, which is very connected. Really, just improves sales. It improves response to what we're putting out. Obviously, communication. I'm very focused on communication with a purpose. So we don't just communicate for the sake of communication. We communicate because we actually want to see some outcome. So when we think about our messaging, we're communicating clearly to particular people, audiences, with couching our communication in the way in which we want those people to respond. But good communication is with a purpose. It increases response, increases sales, increases the number of people that maybe want to take up our services or getting our message across. It saves us time, but it's just an effective way of actually us operating. And as we go through, great, David, always come back, if you think, if that's clear, if it's not clear, come back and to say, can we maybe sort of revisit that, but I'll just keep going. So I mentioned right at the beginning about maintaining a good reputation. Often, a lot of our businesses, we will have values in which these are the things which we want, the sort of almost the lines, the rail tracks we want our business to run around. This is almost the DNA in which we want to run it with. So whether they be relational, it be about generosity, it be about professionalism, it be about being people-centered, etc. And I think in this time, good communication, what it does, it says, actually, we don't just say stuff, we do things as well. And it's been said that what you say is what you want to be, what you do shows who you are. And with some of these things, really, actually, we want to show through good communication, we really are who we say we are, and we build our reputation. It's no good as saying we're relational people, and then at the first sort of sign of trouble, actually the way in which we treat our clients, we treat our staff is quite aggressive. We maybe sort of force people into that. We're very centered maybe just on profit rather than actually thinking about the people. What we want to see and what builds our relationships are things where we say actually the values we talk about are actually this is how we live our lives. So I'm sure one of my friends has just lost her job. She just started with a new organization, and as a result of coronavirus, she's just lost her job. But wouldn't it have been great if that company had said, actually, we know you've only just started. We're a relational company, and we're going to keep you on. We're going to be committed to you, and we're going to see this through together. And if what would she have said? Because she would have said, well, that's not what I was expecting. That and she would have probably told other people about that. But that sort of relationship, that reputation, that's how we sort of build upon our good reputation, things like that. So,
yeah.
And also connected to that, of course, is maintaining good relationships that will sustain your business into the future. I think one of the things about relationships we always talk about is communication. It's just keep communicating, keep saying sort of things, checking, remembering that communication isn't just one way; it's two way as well. And we all can think back to the summer, or last summer, when England, that fantastic day at Lord's, when England beat New Zealand in the World Cup final.
Yeah.
And I was looking at a piece of interview with Ian Morgan, the captain, England captain, and he said the two biggest lessons that he learned from were actually being able to keep calm under pressure, which is absolutely critical here, but also listening and feedback, listening to feedback more than anything else. And with communication, we often fall into the trap that comms is just one way. It's us giving out, but also it's about actually what we get back, and it's that two-way process. So maintaining relationship.
Sorry, just to quickly pick up on that thread. I mean, a lot of business owners, a lot of senior managers are going to be under huge pressure, perhaps financially within the business, bottom lines, and all those kind of things. How would you, before people start communicating, in light of those pressures, in light of thinking clearly under pressure, what would we might do a separate video on the hows of doing this stuff, but is there any kind of tip that you give somebody before they start communicating in those sort of situations? Because it is a reactive time. This is changing day to day, and lots of people's situations are changing day to day. Is there any kind of thoughts around that?
Well, I think I do like my cricket, and I'll go back to another cricket analogy. Well, I was watching a piece on the Australian cricket team, behind the scenes of the Australian cricket team during last summer's Ashes. And they zoomed in on them just after, I think, the match when Ben Stokes had basically single-handedly won things. And the phrase they kept using was, remember the process, stick to the process. We've prepared things. We know what works. We know what we prepared for. We know what's made us successful. Stick to the process. And I was, first of all, I was saying, in those situations, what's made you successful. You know who you are, what you've done. Stick to the process. Don't lose your head in the sort of the stressful sort of times. Stick to the process. Stick to the things that are, the relational values that have made you good. Think about, how you treat your customers. Stick to the process. Keep that. So it's the people that lose their head in this sort of time, but keep communicating and stick to the process.
Yes, that's really helpful. Really helpful. And in terms of this sort of time of listening now, how would that kind of shape people's communications, or why is that important at this time?
Well, as we know, we all want to, people want to be heard. And any business relationship is by definition a relationship. It's a combination of two people, and having a shared sort of objective and a shared goal, and hopefully a sort of a joint outcome, which is something successful, that meets the objectives. But to do that, there has to be that two-way communication, that listening. And often, I think there's two things here. One is actually having a context where people can, people are allowed to feedback, and you're able to listen. And the second one is a state of mind, is sort of almost an active listening. So many times we hear when people are saying we've said something, but actually it hasn't necessarily been heard. So in communication, very much effective communication is about actually just getting through, but also listening to what is being said and active listening. So it's great to be thinking about that, putting things in place where whether it be a phone call, it's an email to your to people on your database. Don't just do it as as something which is a cursory sort of type thing, but actually take time and treat people as individuals. The more personal communication is, the more effective it is. So if I can pick up the phone, I got an email last week from a client of mine, and we were trying to rearrange a meeting, and I thought, well, I can just send them another email, or alternatively, I can pick up the phone. And one of the great things about this time is that we've got a little bit more time to maybe spend a little bit of time on people and a bit of time reflecting. So I picked up the phone, and we had a really good conversation, and it was just, it reminded me how effective personal communications can be. So trying to make your communication as personal as possible actually does make a difference. And it may, in the short term, take a little bit more time, but in the long term, it will save you time and be much more effective and much more productive.
It's one of the things I've been talking about with my clients as well, is using this time to build relational capital. We have one thing we all have at the moment is time. Even if you're just saving your commuting time, whether that's 20 minutes each way or 2 hours each way, everybody's saving, got more time in the day for things. And I think speed of decision making, speed of actually contacting people, I'm finding is going up during this time. So it's an amazing opportunity, as you were saying, to actually have those one-to-one kind of conversations. I think also a lot of people right now, a lot of my clients, one of the things they're saying is they've got clear head time as well. So it's not just they have time, they actually have clear head time, where a lot of the clutter, a lot of the noise, a lot of the day-to-day sort of pressures or strains or decision-making, noise around the office, whatever it is, has evaporated overnight as they're working in a spare room or a study or a sitting room or a kitchen or wherever they are. And to have a lot more quality time to think about their business and where they're going and what they're doing. And what would be great, I don't know if you have time, but it would be brilliant, perhaps another day, is to look at the kind of how do people then kind of reshape their strategy. Because I know a lot of the time people don't necessarily think about their communication strategy a lot, or they did it years ago, they've got that file somewhere under a pile of stuff in office, it's getting a bit dusty, and could do with a spring clean. So maybe if you have time, perhaps later in the week or something, we can look at the sort of hows of perhaps freshening up that communication strategy. But for business owners now who do have a bit more time to think things through, what would be sort of your one top tip that could hopefully lead into something else another time? But what would be your one top tip for business leaders now who have time, who've been forced to step off the treadmill for a few weeks? Is there any kind of tips that you'd give them?
I would say to them, just keep communicating. We're talking about maintaining relationships, building sort of reputation. So long, with so many of our businesses, we've spent a long time building up the reputation, and as we all know, reputation can go almost overnight, and we've all seen examples of that. But one thing which in this time I would say is just keep, as Nike always used to say, just do it. And there's a number of things, we can think, well, actually, I might make mistakes, but good communicators are often people who have been poor communicators, but have just kept doing it and have got better. Yeah. And in this time, I would say, use the time to focus, on your business, but to focus especially on your customer needs. And on focusing on customer needs and client needs is the best way to find those out is that effective communication through that. So find what works for you best, whether that be email, it be a phone call. It can't be a cup of coffee in this lockdown period, but often it might be a virtual cup of coffee.
Yeah.
But find what medium works for you best, and get communicating, get talking, and also start listening. We've got 2 ears but only one mouth, as somebody famously said. I think it might be Muhammad Ali. But let's listen and focus our plans upon what we hear and the feedback we give.
Brilliant.
That would probably be my top tip.
Yeah, I think that's a very good one. And thank you so much. I've taken loads from this, not least thinking, just go back to the processes under pressure. I think just because the sort of current time is challenging, I think go back to what's worked, go back to the root, strip everything back, look at the processes that are in place that are getting results before. I think that's really, really helpful. And just being clear in that strategy, listening as well to clients and what they're going through is fantastic. And thank you so much for your time. I know it's very valuable time, very precious time. Thank you for making the time, and I'll definitely follow up with an email and maybe see if we can do another one and look at the hows of strategy, and maybe give people some kind of starting points to sort of refresh or maybe even start a communication strategy that they might never have done before. But Alan, thank you so much for your time today. It's a real pleasure, and go well and stay safe in this time.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, David. And thank you for everybody else that's been listening. Thank you. Bye-bye.